Moscow, 1922. The Soviet Union was a whirlwind of oratory giants debating the future of a new world, oblivious to the man in the corner, while Leon Trotsky and Bukharin commanded the spotlight. Joseph Stalin sat behind a massive desk stacked with mountains of dull administrative files. They nicknamed him Comrade Card Index. He was the unremarkable clerk of the revolution, a gray blur that no one considered a threat, but while the others argued over theory. Stalin was building the machinery of absolute control, one name at a time. He understood a secret his rivals ignored. Power didn't lie in the speech, but in the person who appointed the speakers in the remote towns of the Urals and the factories of the South. Stalin was gardening, placing loyalists in every key position of the party. These little Stalins owed their careers to the man in Moscow. They were the invisible foundation of a personal empire built on gratitude and fear. Then came January 1924. The death of Vladimir Lenin left a vacuum that the giants of the revolution rushed to fill. Stalin transformed the funeral into a stage. He stood as the grieving son, the humble disciple, always within reach of the fallen leader, Leon Trotsky, the flamboyant intellectual. Was nowhere to be seen, misled about the date. His absence was framed as a betrayal of Lenin's memory. Stalin didn't just bury Lenin. He mummified him. He turned the revolutionary into a secular saint, with himself as the high priest of the cult. The 1920s became a masterclass in divide and conquer. Stalin allied with the moderates to crush the radicals, then turned his fury on the moderates. One by one, the heroes of the revolution were expelled and mocked. Their faces were scrubbed from the history they had helped to write. By the 1930s, the clerk had become a man of steel. The Great Turn had begun, forced industrialization fueled by the labor of the GULAG. Terror became a tool of statecraft. In the Lubyanka basement, former comrades confessed to impossible crimes under the glare of a single bulb, at his dacha. Stalin reviewed the lists of the condemned with a red pencil. He scrawled notes like "beat him again" next to his friends' names. The Black Maria vans prowled the night, taking people into the white silence of the North. In the morning, it was as if they never existed. Human lives were the fuel for the Soviet machine. The Belomorkino was dug with wooden shovels in 40 below weather, built on a foundation of bones. In Ukraine, the Holodomor turned a breadbasket into a graveyard. Activists seized every seed, while Stalin dined on caviar in the Kremlin. The culture of silence was complete. Children were taught in special orphanages to disown their traitor parents and worship them. Father of nations, war brought a new test. The red flag eventually flew over the Reichstag, but the victory only deepened Stalin's suspicion. Returning heroes were sent to the mines of Magadan. Stalin feared they had been contaminated by the sight of Western freedom. By March 1953, the end came in the quiet of his dacha. He lay on the floor for hours, dying and helpless. His guards were too terrified to enter without orders. And so the man who controlled every life in Russia died alone in his own silence. Stalin's reign ended, but the shadow of the clerk remains a reminder of how bureaucratic mastery can be forged into a terrifying empire. When the announcement finally crackled over the radio, the heart of the comrade-in-arms of Lenin has ceased to beat. A strange paralysis gripped 1/6 of the earth. For 30 years, Joseph Stalin had been the air they breathed and the nightmare they dreamed. People didn't just weep because they loved him. They wept because they had forgotten how to live without a master. In the streets of Moscow, the crush of the mourning crowds became so violent that hundreds were trampled to death. Even in his final exit, Stalin demanded a body count. His inner circle barrier, Khrushchev, Malenkov stood around the casket like jackals. They had spent decades learning how to breathe only when he breathed. Now, in the sudden, ringing silence of his death, they realized they didn't know how to be human. They only knew how to be survivors. Within months, the de-Stalinization began. They pulled his body out of the mausoleum and buried it in the dirt behind a stone wall. They renamed the cities. They tore down the statues. They acted as if they could scrub the steel out of the Soviet soul with soap and water. But you cannot exhume a trauma that has become the foundation of a nation. Stalin's true masterpiece wasn't the factories, the tanks, or the atomic bomb. It was the genetic memory of fear. He left behind a civilization of people who whispered in their own kitchens, even 50 years later. He left behind a bureaucracy that valued the ledger over the life where a mistake in a single pen stroke still felt like a death warrant. Imagine a grandson in a modern Russian flat finding a yellowed photograph hidden in a floorboard. He sees a face he doesn't recognize. A great-uncle, perhaps his eyes scratched out with a needle by a terrified relative decades ago. This is Stalin's living shadow. He didn't just kill people, he killed the memory of them. The Man of Steel proved a terrifying thesis that you can take a diverse, sprawling empire and reduce it to a single pulse's own. He showed that if you are cruel enough, for long enough, the people will eventually mistake the boot on their neck for a pillar of stability. Today, in the 2020s, Stalin is making a comeback. New statues are appearing. Textbooks are being rewritten to describe him as an effective manager. The Gulag is framed as a harsh necessity for modernization. Stalin didn't invent cruelty, he just organized it. He took the little man's resentment and gave it a badge and a gun. If Stalin were alive today, he wouldn't need the Black Maria. He would love the algorithm. He would adore the facial recognition camera. The darkest time has moved from the permafrost, too. The fiber optic cable, the methods of the gray blur, the isolation of the individual, and the permanent state of suspicion are now being executed by code. We must ask, why does the shadow still fall over the snow? It's because Stalin understood a dark truth about humanity. Most people don't want to be free, they want to be safe. And if the price of safety is a neighbor's life, many will pay it. The gray blur has faded, the Man of Steel is rusted, but the people remain. For every file Stalin closed, we must open a book. Our task is to ensure that the Man of Steel is remembered not for his strength, but for the fragility of the truth he tried to destroy.